I'm constantly telling people that that they could moneyball their agency. It's a movie that talks about this concept of not buying players but buying wins. And in order to buy wins, you got to buy runs, right? Well, very hard to do inside of an insurance agency. We created the transaction. The transaction says, hey, we do these 20 things as a service person or these 5 things as a salesperson. Each of them have a number of things that go into it: time, process, technology. And if you could see those things at scale, you'd know over time and over a certain amount of transactions how much each transaction cost. And inside of an agency, I've contended for a long time that our runs that we need to generate are transactions. They're not people. They're the transactions our people do. And most agencies do thousands of transactions. 3 or 4 people generate thousands of transactions. And if you can get an extra $2 or $3 or $4 per transaction times thousands of transactions times 5, 10 people, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars of margins that's sitting inside of a transaction. That is our run. Neon built those. Agents are using them. And so the cost per transaction is becoming, in my estimation, the most valuable metric in the industry, right? Why so valuable? Well, if you know the number of transactions somebody does, then you know whether they're performing. And let's face it, if you can reduce the amount of time in transaction, the customer experience is better. Instead of taking 11 days, it takes 11 minutes. So the customer's happier. You're measuring performance, right? And you're generating margin, profit, and EBITDA. And so many people run around and say, I have X amount of premium or X amount of people. Neons run around and say, how many transactions? What types of transactions? And what's your margin per transaction? You see, when you're thinking that way, you're really starting to look at how your agency is performing. And it's not just about your agency. It's about the customer experience. If things are moving faster, cleaner, better, easier for the customer, they stay longer. Generates more margin. If you're analyzing your player performance on the field, well, maybe you got to move some people down to the minor leagues. Or when someone gets traded, maybe you don't replace them. Maybe you don't need to make that next hire. And when you use that transaction to think about the value one insurance carrier or insurtech is bringing to that process, because you do it thousands of times a year, all of a sudden you're having the better and right conversation with your vendor partner, your carrier partner. Now you're moneyballing your agency. And so I think almost nothing about premium these days when I'm thinking about the growth of an insurance agency. I almost think nothing about headcount, except it should be going down. I think about the number of transactions an agency does a year, the transaction type, the cost per transaction, and how we get more margin out of those. Because for independent agents, that's what a run is. The profit from each transaction. And those runs, stacked over a course of a year, turn into wins, and those wins turn into success.